Imagine this, okay. A fleeting encounter you have with a stranger. It's so brief, maybe you barely even register it. But then somehow it subtly shapes the next, 10 years of your life. And it leads you right back to that exact person, but under the most unexpected and really dangerous circumstances. Welcome to this deep dive into what the source calls a fateful decade, chance encounter to grand adventure. Our mission today really is to explore how one single meeting, something seemingly tiny, can set two lives on these parallel paths that then just dramatically crash back together a decade later. And it sparks this huge adventure that changes them both and, honestly, the world around them, too.
Yeah, we're digging into this really compelling story. It feels almost like a modern myth, you know?
Yeah.
It's a tale about fate, maybe, and purpose and the quiet power of human connection that we often don't see. You're going to hear how just one moment on a train platform of all places, echoed through 10 years. 10 years of totally different lives. And it all culminates in this dramatic jungle rescue and then a partnership that actually created lasting change.
So where does this incredible story kick off? It starts with what our source calls the first whisper. A chance meeting in Kyoto. Okay, picture it. Sophie Lynn, she's 18, just out of high school. She's wandering these narrow Kyoto streets, camera in hand, right? Just exploring. And she misses her bus, totally missed it. Finds herself on this quiet bench at a kind of forgotten train platform, all alone. Got an hour to kill before the next train.
And that's exactly where she meets Noah Reyes. He's also 18, sitting there sketching rice paddies, actually. Got a guitar slung on his back. And what's really striking about how they start talking isn't some big dramatic thing. It's super simple.
Yeah.
Sophie just comments that he's left-handed.
Yeah, random.
Totally. And Noah just looks up and replies just as simply that she's a tourist. It's such an ordinary start for something that becomes not ordinary at all.
Exactly. And so they spend that hour just talking. And the source is clear. It wasn't like flirting or anything. It describes it as recognition. Like two strangers right on the edge of adulthood seeing a mirror in the other person. That's a really powerful image.
It really is, isn't it? This mirror idea, it suggests something deeper than just, immediate attraction. It's resonance. Sophie, she was planning on university, political science. Noah, he'd actually deferred college, wanted to travel, find something worth creating, he said.
What's interesting is how that 1 hour, that conversation, sort of subconsciously maybe affirmed things for both of them. They weren't just chatting. They were kind of validating these dreams they were just starting to form. They did exchange names, Instagram handles, apparently. But get this, they never actually messaged each other.
Wow.
Yeah. But they both walked away with this really distinct feeling. The source says it was like the universe had whispered a secret, then fell silent again. That quiet thing, you know? Sometimes that sticks more than a loud announcement. That really makes you think, doesn't it, about those brief meetings you might have had. Someone you talked to for an hour on a plane, maybe. Someone you never saw again. But something about that conversation just stuck. It stayed with you. This story really brings that home, how these subtle signals, those quiet recognitions can echo through your life, echo in ways you don't even understand until, well, much later. And echo they definitely did. So let's fast forward 10 years. You see these two young adults connected so briefly, and they embark on these vastly different journeys, but equally impactful in their own ways. Sophie's path was, wow, pretty impressive. Graduated top of her class, did an internship at the UN, then became a field officer for an environmental NGO.
Right.
The source highlights her reputation, called it clarity in chaos. She was known for turning empathy into real action. Crisis zones, Jakarta, Nairobi. She was right there, on the ground, making things happen.
And then you contrast that with Noah's path. Totally different direction, on the surface anyway, but still deeply purposeful. He becomes this freelance documentary filmmaker, living really light, hostel, sometimes just a hammock, traveling through these post-conflict regions, telling the stories that mainstream media just ignored.
Important work.
Absolutely. And his films, they got known for their raw human intimacy. That's the phrase used. They started gathering awards. That raw human intimacy, it wasn't just a style choice, right? It was about showing unfiltered truth, often about people on the margins. And here's that subtle thread again. Even though they never physically crossed paths for 10 years, they'd occasionally see each other's names pop up, maybe a mutual friend's Instagram post or, in film credits somewhere.
Wow.
It was, like the source says, like chasing the ghost of a memory. Almost there, but not quite.
And this is where those threads just start weaving together in this completely unpredictable way. 10 years. 10 years after that Kyoto meeting. Sophie gets this urgent call. It's her organization's director. An aid worker is missing. Northern Colombia, deep jungle, potentially cartel activity involved. It's serious.
Okay.
They need someone experienced, someone discreet, someone who can handle that kind of complexity. And then the reveal, the absolute shocker, the missing man. It was Noah Reyes.
That moment, that turning point, it really highlights something powerful about our connections, doesn't it? How the ones that end up being most significant can start as these really subtle things you could easily just dismiss, and then bam, years later, their importance is revealed. It's kind of a reminder that even if careers or lives seem to go in totally opposite directions, there can still be this shared spirit, maybe a shared purpose underneath it all, even across continents, even after a decade of silence. And eventually, things might just converge.
So the moment Sophie got that call, her reaction was instant, zero hesitation. She flew straight to Born-Covermasia, connected with a local fixer, someone who knows the area, and started that incredibly tough journey. Upriver, into the dense Colombian jungle. You can just imagine the mix of feelings.
Yeah.
Urgency, professionalism, but maybe also that ghost of a memory pushing her forward.
And the reunion, just 2 days later, it was pure drama.
Yeah.
Sophie finds him. He's alive, thank God, but in really bad shape, dehydrated, his foot's infected, and his livelihood basically totally destroyed.
Oh, man.
He'd been following a lead, apparently, about illegal deforestation tied to paramilitary activity. His local guide just abandoned him out there.
Left him.
Yeah, just left him. And the source paints this scene so vividly, Sophie just staring at him like, is this real? Is he a hallucination? The recognition wasn't tears or anything. It was almost sarcastic, a moment of just sheer disbelief and maybe some dark humor.
Yeah.
Sophie's just like, Noah Reyes. And he looks up, just as stunned, and goes, Sophie Lynn. It just speaks volumes about how incredibly unlikely the whole situation was. Finding this person from your distant past, here, now, like this.
And right then, they didn't even need to ask the how or the why. Not yet. They just kind of collapsed into this shared laughter. Exhausted laughter, shocked laughter, and just absurdly grateful laughter, I guess.
Yeah.
The immediate thing wasn't catching up on 10 years. It was just, get out of the jungle.
That shared laughter, though, in the middle of all that danger, it's pretty profound. It tells you something about the kind of connection that gets forged when survival is literally the only thing that matters. In those extreme moments, all the superficial stuff just melts away, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You connect on this really basic, fundamental human level, history becomes less important than just surviving the present together.
Yeah. So, getting out was just the start of the next ordeal. The trek back to safety, it was harrowing. They faced massive storms. A bridge was washed out completely. And there was this one terrifying night where their makeshift camp actually got raided. They had to hide in tall grass, absolutely silent, while armed men walked right past them, just feet away.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah, it was real crucible.
And yet, amidst all that intense danger, the source says something else bloomed.
Yeah.
Which is just fascinating. What really stands out from this part of the story are the conversations they started having in those stolen moments, huddled around the tiny fire maybe, or sharing whatever scraps of food they had. Noah started talking about the people he'd interviewed for his films. Farmers losing their land, rebel defectors, kids born into silence and conflict zones. And Sophie, she shared too. The weight of the decisions she'd had to make in her work, the people she couldn't save, the burdens she carried.
Heavy.
Really heavy. And this period, this shared vulnerability, it allowed them to kind of rediscover this kindred soul in each other. It wasn't about romance in the typical sense, not then. It was this quiet, steady understanding, a connection forged in crisis, not comfort. And it revealed these deep compatibilities between them.
And it was during that incredibly dangerous journey back that they shared these really poignant confessions, almost unbelievable considering the circumstances. Sophie admits, she says, I think that moment at the train station back in Kyoto, it shaped me. I didn't know it then, but looking back, it did.
Wow.
And Noah's response is just, it hits you. He says, same. I kept drawing you in my sketchbooks for years after that.
No way.
Yeah. He says, I think I was chasing the version of myself I saw in your eyes that day.
That's just remarkable. It's such an insight into how these subtle influences can guide us, under the surface. It really shows how the most significant connections, sometimes they don't form in perfect candlelit settings. They form in the crucible, right? When you're stripped bare by shared challenges. All the pretense falls away. And you see these profound truths about yourself and about the other person. The source kind of suggests that they were, in a way, always moving towards each other again, their paths constantly being shaped by that first, almost mystical meeting, even when they didn't realize it.
So their return to civilization, obviously it made headlines, you can imagine. Missing filmmaker found by fellow humanitarian in jungle rescue. Big story.
Got big drama.
But, as our source points out, the news reports totally missed the deeper impact, the real story underneath. Noah managed to salvage some of his footage. He edited it meticulously. It became this documentary called Echoes of the Green. It was powerful. It actually sparked a major international investigation into illegal land seizures in that region.
Incredible.
And Sophie, she took a year off from her usual field work, and she co-directed this joint initiative with indigenous leaders from that exact same region where Noah was found. So their individual missions, which had been separate for so long, they were now completely intertwined and amplified.
And that's where the story really goes beyond just a personal tale, right?
Mm.
It becomes this catalyst for real systemic change.
Mm.
And the way their personal relationship evolved is also pretty compelling. Very understated. They quietly became a couple, no big announcements, no red carpets, none of that.
Mm.
Apparently, it was a very conscious decision. Two people who'd found each other twice in one lifetime, they decided, quote, not to tempt fate a third time.
Huh. Good call.
Yeah. Their story kind of became this whispered legend, this myth among their colleagues in humanitarian circles, faraway field camps. A story about serendipity and purpose. But the simpler truth, maybe, as the source suggests, is just that the universe had patiently waited until they were both ready to cross that threshold into true adulthood together.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't about one single adventure ending. It was about a shared journey finally finding its proper alignment.
And the epilogue described in the source is just, it's beautiful, really. Years later, they're in this remote village somewhere in the Andes, and there's a mural being painted on a school wall. The mural depicts three things: a train platform, a jungle path, and two silhouettes standing side by side.
Wow.
Sophie takes a photo of it, turns to Noah. He just smiles and says, "Nice symmetry."
Yeah.
And her reflection in that moment is, 10 years, one chance, one adventure.
And his response, his lasting thought, it's the perfect final note. He says, no, the adventure's still going. And that just perfectly encapsulates it, doesn't it? How the most impactful personal journeys often lead to this broader change, and how an adventure isn't necessarily a single event with a neat beginning and end.
Right.
It's an ongoing process, growth, connection, impact. It's realizing that the journey itself, that's the real destination.
So this deep dive into Sophie and Noah's story, it really shows how one brief encounter, something you could easily forget, how it can plant a seed that just blossoms into this grand adventure, shaping individual lives, yes, but also sparking real global change. Their story just underscores these profound connections, often unseen, that seem to guide our paths. It illustrates how those little whispers from the universe maybe can be the blueprint for what comes next. So as you go about your day-to-day, maybe consider this. How often do you dismiss those quiet recognitions, those small moments that feel kind of significant, but there's no obvious reason why? What grand adventures, both for you personally and maybe even for the wider world, could be waiting for you if you just paid a little closer attention to those subtle connections in your own life?